Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with Kathleen. It's the end of the quarter. We've got the Kick Butt coffee cup. I can't tip it too much because actually it's 3/4 of the way full. And this boot holds a lot of coffee. So this is a super caffeinated day for me. But yeah, just thinking about Q1 and thinking about the rest of the year. And we do operate on a calendar year at my company. I know other companies do other things, but the calendar, it's almost spring, gives us a good time for reflection. How have things gone? How do we feel about the things that we've done? And what do we want to do next? And so, as a leader in my business, and by the way, you're all leaders in your business, no matter what your role is or what you're up to, we're all leaders. We're leaders in our private spaces. We're leaders at work. We're leaders everywhere we go. Leaders lead. And we don't ever stop that activity. We just transform it into different forms depending on where we're at and what we're doing. So as we think about our businesses and our leadership, I'm thinking about outcomes. I'm thinking about how do I drive to those outcomes, maybe in a different way, in a better way, because I always want to get better. And so, I was chatting with people about it and thought that a good thing to talk about in this podcast might be just how we think about that and how we create even greater success for ourselves moving forward and greater success for the people that we work with in a way that feels good, that's not compressed and driving to the finish line, because we've still got quite a ways to go this year. So if we're pushing people too hard or we're creating too much tension or frenzy, that's not going to go well for us. That only works in a short-term way. It doesn't drive to long-term outcomes, and it certainly doesn't create good outcomes for people, which is what I know anybody watching this podcast cares about, because you'd get sick of me after 30 seconds if you don't like people. So let's dig in a little bit, shall we? When we think about driving to outcomes, a lot of times what we really think about are, what are the best tactics? What are the best project management systems? What are the best ways of maybe communicating with people? That kind of stuff. I am not going to talk about that at all. There are 1,000,001 articles about that. There are many different technology systems and tips and ideas that you can use in that space that help you tactically, depending on the way in which you work, to make those outcomes real. Instead, I want to talk about the other two sides of the triangle. So I do see this as a triangle, and I do see the tactics down here as kind of the foundation for the other two pieces. That's how we actually get those things to line up. But on the one side is self-awareness. How are we showing up? How are we showing up to our teams? How are they receiving what we have to offer? Who are we and how do we show up in a project? And then who do we need the team members to be based on who we are? And more importantly, who we're not. So for example, I recently took a DISC assessment. It's been many years since I did that. The results were not surprising. I have a very high I, which if you're not familiar with DISC, basically means that you're a people and relationship person and that you're operating very intuitively in those spaces. I am a very high D as well, which means that I have a very sort of dominant personality. And there's two ways to operate according to DISC. There's sort of your natural orientation, which for me is an ID in that order. And then there's the way that you operate inside of a workspace. And inside of the workspace, I've suppressed that dominant aspect of my personality quite a bit. And that shows up in my test results. That's my adapted style. And the reason why that's my adapted style is because I want to create a collaborative environment for people to operate in. And the only way to do that is to take the D down a few notches. But most importantly, I can flex that. So if we've got a crisis management situation and we need someone to step up, take charge, make people feel comfortable, line out the to-do items, get the stuff done, I got you. What am I not is an S and a C. So, creating those really detail-oriented plans or, thinking of all the risks that surround a particular project, those are not my strong suits. So depending on what I'm working on, I need to really make sure that I find people who are going to be attentive to every single detail, who are going to think those things through, who are going to find the risks and identify them. And look, there's a lot of different self-understanding systems out there. There are a lot of different ways of kind of understanding how people are and how they show up in relation to work, and who you are and how you show up in relation to work, right? And then making sure that you've got teams that are good mixes of people, whether those are people directly working for you or whether those are teams of people that you've assembled from around your company. And at times, you've got to also look at the content, which is sort of down here in the tactical bottom of the triangle that we've created. And wow, that triangle I just made is pretty wonky, huh? Anyway, you've got to look at the content too, and you may need to bring in even outside resources if you don't have the right content or expertise resources inside of your company in order to accomplish something. But really, I want to talk about this other side to the triangle, this side, right? So here's the self-awareness piece. That's going to develop over time. We're going to refine that over time. The team's going to give us input about how we show up, what's landing on them, and so forth. But one of the pieces that I really want to dig into is clarity. So if we create perfect clarity for the well-intentioned, hardworking people that we have on our teams, then they're going to be able to execute, even if we're not so good at the tactics, even if our project plan isn't that great, even if we're not using a project plan, we're just having lots of conversations and discussions. People are going to get really clear on where to go and what's next by virtue of the fact that we've created clarity. And when I recently asked a group of people that I talked to about clarity, I said, what do you think clarity is? So of course they said, well, it's the act of being clear. It's the act of giving, in a business context, it's the act of giving very specific and detailed instructions. And yes, specifics and details and background information are very important to understanding. And we do want to gather those and provide those. But that is one small aspect of clarity. And so given that there is a much more robust understanding that's available to us, I thought, hey, let's kick butt. Let's talk about it. All right. So clarity is transparent. It's easily heard. It's easily visible. It's unbiased. And by unbiased, what I mean is that it's not rooted in greed, aversion, ambiguity, anger, or angst. So it really is a perspective that is very clear and rooted from a very good place in terms of its motivation. And lastly, and really importantly, clarity includes multiple perspectives. So then if we're to embody clarity in our project plans and our meetings and our outcome-based sessions of all kinds, whether they're operating mechanisms for existing, work that's happening, or whether it's a whole new initiative that you're putting in front of someone, what does the embodiment look like? Okay. So again, 5 fingers. Okay. So active listening and gathering input. And look, I could talk for probably 20 or 30 minutes about active listening by itself. Active listening is such a critical skill. And as like a little personal side note about active listening, I actually took a class on it in college. There is a lot to it. And I wouldn't say I'm a master of it, but I'm certainly much better at it than I used to be. And it is everything. It informs so much of the work that I do to be an active listener. And it makes me such a better human being as well. So embodiment of clarity is active listening and gathering input. That's where, the easily heard comes into play. Okay. We're seeking clearly and we're aligning to facts. So this isn't just, my gut says, let's go this way. So let's go. And here we go. And we're not clear, right? It's seeking clarity and looking at things very clearly and aligning to facts. Okay. That's 2 things. It's skillful truth telling and proactive communication. So proactive communication means that communication doesn't just happen once. This isn't about me talking to my employees saying, here's the 3 things that I need you to do. Go away and do it. Tell me when it's done. And then, we're all aligned and away we go. This is an ongoing process of communicating to people and inviting them to also do skillful truth telling and to communicate proactively around it. It also embodies connecting with one another. So when we create these working teams, in order for people to be most effective and have the maximum amount of clarity, there has to be connection among the members of the group. That's not just you as the leader to the group, it's everybody with one another. And then how they seek help and seek to help others and to support others in turn. So those are the 5 embodiments: active listening and gathering input, seeing clearly and aligning to facts, skillful truth telling, proactive communication, connecting with one another, and then the seeking help and seeking to help and support. So the vast majority of problems that you run into in a business context actually boil down to a lack of clarity. And this lack of clarity stretches across both creating accountable systems and compassionate systems. So first things first, and this comes down to kind of that self-awareness piece that I talked a little bit about, but I'm not going to overly skew toward in this conversation. Are you clear? Do you really get it? Do you need to talk to your boss again? Do you need to understand the larger industry and business context? Do you need to reach out to your network inside or outside of work? Do you really understand what you're trying to accomplish? Do you understand how this connects back to the goals of the organization, the group, or your own goals and values? Do you have a clear understanding of the what, the who, the how? Do you know the timeline? And then have you thought about how you're going to resource this? Not just the team members at your disposal, but literally who has what skills in your organization or outside your organization? Is there anything you need to do to prepare? Is there anything else you can bring to bear on this initiative that's really going to be helpful? And then, are you owning what you have to do? Are you accountable for this outcome? Are you prepared to communicate or report out frequently? And then, are you engaging with compassion? So are you continuously learning, practicing curiosity, integrating new perspectives or surprising data? I call this reporting in, by the way. So there's the reporting out, letting everybody else in the organization sort of participate in your results or your milestones. And then there's the reporting in, which is the compassion, the learning, the curiosity, the integration of new perspectives. I will say to you, along the lines of like being cowgirl about this today here, that I used to be very cowgirl about all this, right? Maybe I was not even the cowgirl. Maybe I was the horse, right? Getting the directives, understanding where we needed to go, integrating things in the beginning, and then I would gallop. I was running for the dang roses. I was not pausing, at any of those laps to say, hey, what's going on? What new integration can I get to and stuff like that. So sometimes, we would win the race, we would be done the fastest, but was the work I was doing the best and most well-informed work ever? No. And did it leave people in the dust? Yeah, it sure did. And so people would say, I had somebody tell me at one point in my career journey, wow, Kathleen, you get a lot done, right? You're making omelets, but you are also definitely breaking eggs. And sometimes you're dropping other ingredients on the ground, right? So you're leaving some really important things and important people behind because you don't pause and reintegrate. And yes, that makes things take a little longer. And your natural sort of impatience / reactivity is driving you to a place where your outcomes aren't always as good as they could be, or would be if you slowed down just like, the tiniest amount. So, once you've made sure you're clear and that you're owning it, the question is, are you operating courageously? Are you ensuring that you have alignment with others in the organization, even when they don't agree or the news is bad? Have you told everybody who needs to be told, or are you avoiding those trouble spots? If you're avoiding trouble spots, then you're creating pitfalls for the other members of your team. It's really incumbent on you that even when you don't work well with someone or there's a difficulty ahead that you're hoping maybe won't happen or whatever, you've got to lean into those difficulties, everybody. You've got to really manage to them. And then you've got to be receptive to that information from the person that maybe you don't align with as well or whatever. You can pause, you can relax, you can open yourself to the input, and then you can receive it. And whether you choose to react to it or not is up to you. Also, are you able to ask for and receive help? Do you know how many people I talk to, particularly, high performing women who say that they're not able to really ask for and receive help because they feel like it's a sign of weakness. And because, honestly, we get rewarded for being independent. We get rewarded for doing things on our own and, being a hard driving, high output kind of person. So then, because we get rewarded for not asking for help in certain areas of our life or being self-reliant, that's considered, when someone says to you, hey, you're a really self-reliant person, we take that very positively. If someone said, you're a person that depends on a lot of others to get things done, we might not think that that's such positive input. But in reality, if we're totally self-reliant, we are caught in a gigantic ego trap. And eventually that's going to backfire because nobody's capable of doing things without the input, help, support, and resourcing of others. And ultimately, there are going to be gaps that we can't surmount on our own. So really being able to ask for and receive help and being open and having the, I don't even know if it's humility, but just, really the openness to accept that help is so super important. And then once we've done all of that background work, now we make sure that everybody on the team is clear. We lay out that exciting, juicy vision. We assign the roles so everyone is clear about what they have to do. We work on responsibilities. We are very crystal about our expectations. We, agree upon timelines. We collectively feel good about the outcomes that we're going to achieve and accomplish. We then work on repetition and immersion so that there's a real true practice around it and everybody stays aligned because we continue to weave that vision throughout everything we do. And then we line up the correct operating mechanisms, all of that tactical stuff, regular meetings and scrums and engagement and training and learning and reintegration opportunities and reporting out and reporting in. We set up all of that stuff, right? And that naturally emanates from all of that. And then last but not least, around clarity, we expect things to go wrong. It is not realistic to expect everything to go well, no matter how great of a planner you are. Human systems are always going to have some chaos in them. That's nature. Communication will not be perfect. I promise you, I think I've communicated perfectly in this podcast. I think I'm on it today. Have you understood everything I've said? Maybe, maybe not. Are you even actively listening to me right now? Or are you doing 3 other things? No judgment, but that is part of what happens. And the good news is, of course, you can rewatch this recording anytime when you have time to pay a bit more attention if this is something that's resonated for you. Your own experience, power, or confirmation bias can cause real issues in execution. So just remember to stay open. And then remember that if we don't make mistakes, limiting our learning experiences, mistakes are freaking awesome learning experiences. So as I have a tendency to do, I read this beautiful little poem about mistakes, and I just loved it. So I would love to read it to you as well, as just a reminder of how great mistakes can be. Last night, as I was sleeping, I dreamt, marvelous error, that I had a beehive here inside my heart. And the golden bees were making white combs and sweet honey from my old failures. That's Last Night as I Was Sleeping by Antonio Machado. Beautiful, beautiful thought. As part of all this too, let's foster safety for the human beings that are operating inside of this clarity system. That's the compassion part of clarity. Human beings operate best in safe and secure environments. And the only way for us to really gather that input, that understanding that we need from everybody in the group, and for them to be able to tell us when things are going wrong, is if we've created that safe environment. Let's listen to the stories that other people have us to tell us about themselves instead of making them up. And then let's tell ourselves stories about others of abundance, happiness, powerfulness, and good intentions. Let's understand that if we are anxious, stressed, or otherwise beleaguered, then we're not creating good outcomes, and it's going to make it very hard for us to hear others. So let's manage our own personal, complex emotional environment in a productive way. And then let's work with each person to set the appropriate balance between structure and freedom for that person. You all know I'm a big advocate for human beings and all of their wonderful, magnificent, glorious, beautiful, creative form. And this safety net that we can create for people, particularly when we are in a reporting structure where people report to us, is critical. But again, we're leaders and we can do this from any seat. And that fostering of safety is a super important concept toward the clarity that we want to create. And so I wish you a very clear and direct path to success in the remaining 9-ish months of this year. And in fact, in your life in general. And I hope that this little, coffee that we've shared with each other and this little moment and some of these thoughts around clarity really help you to think about how you're going to create even more of that. And therefore, better outcomes for yourself and your personal life and for your business and amongst your teams, all of your initiatives, everything, because that's what this is about, is us participating in each other, thriving and being successful. And I've hoped I've helped you do that today. Cheers. And thank you for joining us.